There's a question that made a huge impact in my life. It's a simple question, but it has a way of completely changing the direction of a conversation. And that question is this: how do you know? Not what do you believe? Most people can answer that question almost immediately, but I'm interested in something different. How did you arrive there? Because over the last several years, I've realized something. People can believe exactly the same thing for completely different reasons. And those reasons matter. For example, imagine a debate on the internet about a specific topic. Better yet, a meme comes up and people go back and forth and they just debate the topic. There's anger, there's animosity, people call each other names. And then imagine this. Later on, they find out that the meme was fake, meaning the topic they were arguing about didn't even really exist. How often does that happen? I see it happen all the time. People get excited about something, or they have feelings about something, or they believe a thing based on something that's not even real. For a long time, I assumed that if I believed something strongly enough, it was probably true. I don't think I ever said that out loud, but looking back, that's how I often operated. If everyone around me accepted an idea, I usually accepted it too. It felt normal. It felt obvious. And I never really stopped to ask, how do we know this is true? Question for you: have you ever believed something strongly or for a long time, but then later on you realize, or maybe even now you realize, that you never really asked that question: how do you know this is true? One of the unexpected things about building Black Logic Media for me was that it forced me to become much more careful. Every documentary begins with an idea, but ideas aren't enough. Now I have to ask, can I support this? Where did this information come from? Is this a primary source? Or am I repeating something because it's popular or because it's true? And those questions have completely changed the way I research, but they've also changed the way that I live. One thing I've learned is that believing something doesn't make it true. And that sounds obvious until you realize how often we forget it. Human history is full of sincere people who believed things that turned out to be wrong. And they weren't stupid. Many of them were brilliant. They simply didn't have all of the information, or they misunderstood what they had. And that realization has made me much more humble. Because if intelligent people have been wrong throughout history, it's probably wise for me to remain teachable too. I like to look at information as like three categories. One is the lack of information, meaning you don't have enough information. Then another is misinformation, meaning you've been given information that's not correct, it's not true, it's misinformation. But then I would also add another category called misunderstanding of information, meaning you can have all the facts, all of the information be true, the information be correct, but still misunderstand that information and come to the wrong conclusion. So nowadays, when I encounter a new idea, I try not to ask, do I like this? Instead, I'll ask, what's the evidence? And that leads to a very different conversation. Sometimes I still end up agreeing. Sometimes I completely change my mind. But either way, I feel like I'm getting closer to reality. And that's become more important to me than simply being right. There's a phenomenon that I like to call the need to be right. Some people just need to be right. And I don't say some people like I'm exempt from that, because I've been that way before myself. You have this need to be right, and that can be either an internal thing or an external thing. Sometimes you might think, well, what does it say about me if I'm wrong? But then you can also think, what does it say about them if they're right? Either way, it ends up the same way. You have this need to be right, so you will overlook evidence and truth and reality just to be right. Sometimes you'll go as far as closing the door on reality, making sure you don't hear the truth so that you can justify it in your mind that based on the information that you have, you're right. I've also noticed something else interesting. Truth doesn't seem to care about my preferences. Reality isn't offended if I misunderstand it. It simply waits for me to discover it. There's something comforting about that. Reality isn't my enemy, it's my teacher. The question is whether I'm willing to become a student. I like to think of reality like this quiet person sitting in a bar. When everybody else is rowdy, there's a lot of conversations going on. People talking to each other, laughing, joking, patting each other on the back, all that good stuff. Everybody's having a good time. And then there's this man or woman sitting at the bar quietly, just sipping on a drink, something like that. And then when you calm down and you've had enough of the jokes for a minute and you just want to gain some peace, you go over to the bar and you sit down beside reality. And reality is not loud, it's not boisterous, it's not cracking jokes, but it's approachable. It's open to conversation. And then you have that conversation with this stranger, reality, in this bar. And you learn something about life that you never knew before or you never suspected before. That's how I like to look at reality. If you had to paint a picture of what reality is like, what would you say? What would be your example of that? I'm interested to know that. But here's something that I'd encourage you to do this week. The next time someone says something that you immediately agree with or immediately disagree with, just pause for a moment and then ask, how do we know? Not because you're trying to argue, but because you're trying to understand. And I found that that question opens doors, that certainty often keeps closed. Imagine a room with a closed door, but someone has already told you what's inside. They've explained it to you. They've described it to you. But the door is closed. You have to ask, do you really know what's in that room? Now just imagine that you're free to investigate. The door's not locked. It's not somewhere that you shouldn't be. You can open it any time. You can choose to do that, or you can just take the other person's word for it, and they may be telling you the truth. But even then, they can't describe everything that's in that room. Even then, they're missing something. And it might be something that's important to you, but it wasn't important to them, so they left it out. Or they forgot it. Doesn't mean that it was ill intent. It's just a difference in perspective. I think one of the greatest gifts that we can give ourselves is permission to keep learning, to keep asking questions, to keep investigating. Not because we're confused, but because reality is always deeper than our current understanding of it. And honestly, I think that's one of the most exciting parts of being alive. Thanks for spending a little time with me, and I'll see you in the next conversation.